He threw away a pizza crust. That's what ended it. Not a confession, not a witness who finally came forward, not a breakthrough in forensic technology that cracked open the case after years of silence. A half-eaten slice of pizza tossed into a garbage can on a Manhattan sidewalk, retrieved by federal agents who had been watching him for months. The DNA on that crust matched hair found wrapped around the body of Megan Waterman, a 22-year-old woman who had been strangled, bound in burlap, and left in the brush near Gilgo Beach more than a decade earlier. Rex Heuermann had spent 17 years building a life that looked completely ordinary. Architect, husband, father, commuter. He drove the same roads, ate lunch at the same spots, worked late in the same midtown office. He coached nobody's suspicion. He triggered no alarms. His neighbors in Massapequa Park knew him as the guy with the deteriorating house and the slightly strange demeanor. Not dangerous, just odd. The kind of man you forget the moment he walks past you. That was the point. On April 8, 2026, Rex Andrew Heuermann stood before a judge in Suffolk County Court, hands shackled behind his back, and admitted in a flat, emotionless voice that he had strangled 8 women. He said the word strangulation so many times, so calmly, that relatives of the victims sitting in the gallery began to sob. His ex-wife gripped the chair in front of her. His daughter wept. Heuermann did not look back at any of them. He killed his first victim in 1993. He killed his last in 2010. For 17 years, no one stopped him. For 13 years after that, no one could prove it was him. The case became one of the most haunting, unsolved serial murder investigations in American history. A coastal stretch of Long Island that swallowed women whole and gave almost nothing back. This is the story of how he did it, why no one saw it, and what it took to finally bring him down. Massapequa Park sits on the south shore of Long Island, about 35 miles east of Manhattan. It is the kind of suburb that feels frozen in a particular version of the American dream. Modest homes, quiet streets, kids on bikes after school, neighbors who wave from driveways. It is the kind of place where nothing terrible is supposed to happen, where people raise families and stay for generations, where a boy can grow up, leave briefly, and come back to buy his childhood home from his own mother. Rex Andrew Heuermann was born on September 13, 1963, in exactly that kind of place, to exactly that kind of family, on the surface. His father, Theodore Heuermann, was a World War II veteran and former second lieutenant in the United States Air Force. By the accounts of those who knew the family, Theodore was a man of rigid expectations and a fierce temper. He demanded order. He demanded performance. He left no space for softness. When Rex was 12 years old, his father died. He never spoke publicly about what that loss meant to him. What investigators, psychologists, and behavioral analysts would later note is that the sudden absence of a domineering, controlling father at precisely the developmental moment when identity begins to calcify rarely leaves nothing behind. His mother, Dolores, was described by childhood acquaintances as controlling in her own right. Heuermann was remembered as a mama's boy, a phrase that carries different weight depending on who says it, but which in this context described a child tethered tightly to one parent after losing another. He seldom stood out socially. He was brusque, strange, some said, background mostly, the kind of boy who occupied space without filling it. He graduated from Berner High School in Massapequa Park in 1981. One of his classmates was the actor Billy Baldwin, who would later express shock on social media upon learning who Rex had become. Heuermann went on to study architecture at the New York Institute of Technology, and by 1987 was working for an architectural firm in Manhattan. He was methodical, competent. Colleagues described him as perfectionist and at times abrasive, a man who believed in precision and had little patience for deviation from his standards. In 1990, he married for the first time. By 1994, that marriage had ended in divorce. That same year, he founded RH Consultants and Associates, his own Manhattan-based architectural consulting firm. He built a real client list: Catholic Charities, the New York City Department of Environmental Protection, American Airlines at JFK Airport. These were not peripheral contracts. They were institutional. They required trust. He earned them through competence and reliability. Also in 1994, he purchased his childhood home in Massapequa Park from his mother for $170,000. He would live in that house for the rest of his free life. Neighbors would later note how, over the years, the property fell into increasing disrepair, peeling paint, deteriorating structure, an anomaly in a neighborhood of well-maintained homes. At the time, no one thought much of it. In 1994, he also remarried. His second wife, Asa Ellerup, was a Scandinavian immigrant. They raised 2 children in that Massapequa Park house, a daughter, Victoria, and a stepson, Christopher. By every outward indication, it was a stable, unremarkable family life. Heuermann commuted to Manhattan. He worked long hours. He came home. He was present at school events, at family occasions, in all the places where a normal husband and father was supposed to be. What no one knew was that 1993, the same year before he bought back his childhood home and the year before he founded his firm and remarried, was also the year he killed for the first time. Sandra Costilla was 28 years old when she disappeared in 1993. Her remains were found by hunters in North Sea, Long Island, the same year. For decades, her case sat unconnected to the series of murders that would later define this investigation. She was not near Gilgo Beach. She was not one of the names that would become famous. She was a woman found in a remote area, her death investigated and stalled, her identity established and then filed away in an unsolved drawer. Heuermann admitted in April 2026 that he killed her. She was his first. The killing of Sandra Costilla happened during a specific window in Rex Heuermann's life, a moment of transition, dissolution, and reconstruction. His first marriage had just ended, or was ending. He was building a new professional identity. He was, in the language of behavioral criminology, entering the phase that FBI profilers call the first act, the translation of fantasy into reality. Organized serial offenders do not begin impulsively. They build toward it, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades. The fantasy precedes the act by a long margin. What formed in Heuermann's interior life during his adolescence and early adulthood is not fully documented. What is documented is the result. Search warrants executed at his home and office after his 2023 arrest revealed thousands of searches related to child pornography. They revealed torture pornography. They revealed what prosecutors described as a so-called blueprint, a document suggesting he had actually planned his kills, refined his method, and studied his own crimes as they were being investigated. This is not the profile of an impulsive man. This is the profile of someone who had been rehearsing mentally and practically for a very long time. After Costilla, there is a gap. The next confirmed victim came in 2000. Valerie Mack was in her 20s when she was killed. Her remains were found in 2 separate locations, some near Gilgo Beach, others in Manorville, which indicated dismemberment. Her case remained unresolved for years. She was not publicly linked to Heuermann until December 2024, when she became one of the later charges added to an already substantial indictment. Jessica Taylor disappeared in 2003 while working as an escort in New York City. She was 20 years old. Some of her remains were found in Manorville in 2003. Others were discovered at Gilgo Beach in 2011, years after her death, during the broader search that would eventually unravel everything. Like Mack, her death involved dismemberment. She was 20 years old. Like Costilla, her name would not become widely known until much later. The years 2003 through 2006 left no confirmed victims attributed to Heuermann. Whether that represents an actual cessation of activity, a period in which he killed without leaving discoverable evidence, or a gap that investigators have not yet closed, remains an open question. What is not in question is what happened next. Starting in 2007, the pace accelerated. Maureen Brainerd Barnes was 25 years old. She disappeared in July 2007, leaving behind a young daughter. She had been working as an escort in the New York City area, advertising her services through online platforms that were becoming increasingly common in that era. Digital storefronts that connected sex workers to clients without the street-level exposure that had defined the profession in earlier decades. For someone like Rex Heuermann, these platforms were not just a means of finding victims. They were a system of plausible deniability, anonymous browsing, prepaid phones. No physical paper trail. Heuermann understood, with the methodical precision of a man who had spent years studying both criminal investigations and his own behavior, that the primary vulnerability in this kind of predation was communication. A call from a personal phone, a credit card transaction, a digital footprint that could be backtraced. He had a system for managing this. He used burner phones, prepaid devices purchased separately, used briefly, then disposed of. He created anonymous email accounts to contact sex workers. He used those accounts exclusively on devices and connections he believed were untraceable. He believed this system was airtight. It almost was. Melissa Barthelemy was 24 years old when she disappeared in July 2009. She had been advertising as an escort through Craigslist. After her disappearance, someone began making calls to her family, taunting calls, using her own phone. The caller was calm, controlled. He told her sister things designed to cause maximum psychological damage. He knew details. He was not afraid. He called multiple times. Those calls would later become one of the most significant investigative threads in the entire case. The phone used to make them was Barthelemy's own. The calls pinged to cell towers in Midtown Manhattan, specifically near the block where Rex Heuermann's office was located. Megan Waterman was 22 years old. She disappeared in June 2010, leaving behind a daughter. She had driven from Maine to Long Island to meet a client she had connected with through an online escort service. She never came back. Amber Lynn Costello was 27 years old. She disappeared in September 2010. A witness near the area where she was last seen reported seeing her get into a dark green first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche. That truck would become, years later, the first physical thread investigators pulled that began to unravel everything. In December 2010, a woman named Shannon Gilbert went missing near Oak Beach on Long Island. She had been working as an escort, had called 911 in a state of apparent panic, and then disappeared. Police searching for her began combing the brush along Ocean Parkway, a remote stretch of Barrier Island east of New York City, where scrub and marshland border the highway in thick, isolating layers. What they found was not Shannon Gilbert. Over the following days and weeks, investigators discovered 10 sets of human remains in the brush along Ocean Parkway, concentrated near a stretch of beach called Gilgo. 4 of those sets were identified quickly as Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, Maureen Brainard Barnes, and Amber Lynn Costello, the women who would become known as the Gilgo Four. The others would take years to identify. Some remain partially unidentified to this day. The discovery sent shockwaves through Long Island and beyond. The pattern was unmistakable. The victims were young women who had been working as escorts. They had been strangled. Their bodies had been wrapped, some in burlap, some bound with belts or tape. They had been placed deliberately in a remote area that suggested local knowledge. Whoever had left them there knew the geography, knew the isolation, knew that Ocean Parkway was a place where things could be left and found only when someone was looking specifically for them. The Suffolk County Police Department launched an investigation that would become, over the next decade, one of the most complicated, controversial, and, at times, deeply troubled serial killer investigations in modern American law enforcement history. The investigation stalled almost immediately. That is not entirely accurate. It is more precise to say that the investigation fractured. Suffolk County, in the years following the discovery at Gilgo Beach, became entangled in its own institutional dysfunction. There were leadership changes, 5 police commissioners in the span of the investigation. There were jurisdictional tensions between the Suffolk County Police Department, the New York State Police, the FBI, and the New York City Police Department. There were accusations, later substantiated, of mismanagement. There were questions about whether investigators had taken the victims seriously. Questions rooted in the uncomfortable reality that the women were sex workers, a population that has historically received diminished urgency from law enforcement. The families felt it. Melissa Brainard Barnes' sister, Melissa Cann, would later stand outside a courthouse and say she had spent 19 years in a space between heartbreak and hope. That is not the language of a family that felt supported by the investigation. That is the language of a family that kept showing up because no one else would. By 2015, the investigation had produced no arrests, no named suspects, no prosecutable leads. The bodies remained identified. The killer remained invisible. New York moved on in the way that it tends to move on. The headlines faded, the task forces were quietly reduced, and the case settled into the category of famous unsolved American mysteries, alongside questions that seemed destined to outlast everyone involved. Rex Heuermann, during these years, continued to go to work. He commuted from Massapequa Park to Manhattan. He maintained his firm. He filed architectural plans and attended client meetings and ate lunch near his Fifth Avenue office. On some of those lunch breaks, investigators would later determine, he used burner phones to contact sex workers. He used the anonymous email accounts he had set up specifically for that purpose. He had been doing this for years, contacting dozens of women, sometimes hundreds of times over short periods, arranging meetings with a methodical consistency that was, in retrospect, staggering in its audacity. He was not hiding in the margins of society. He was at the center of it. The psychological architecture of Rex Heuermann, the interior structure that allowed a man to strangle 8 women over 17 years while maintaining a marriage, a career, and a functioning family life, is not easily reduced to simple explanation. But it is not entirely opaque either. Behavioral analysts and forensic psychologists who have examined the case describe Heuermann as a textbook example of what the FBI calls the organized serial offender, a categorization that refers not to tidiness but to cognitive structure. Organized offenders plan. They select targets deliberately. They manage crime scenes. They anticipate investigation and take steps to frustrate it. They are, in the clinical language of criminal psychology, fully reality-oriented. They know what they are doing. They know it is wrong. They do it anyway. Former FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole, commenting on the case, described Heuermann's type with precision. They're what I call pro-social killers. They have a job, they have a family, they appear to do everything the right way. Those individuals tend to go for a much longer time without being detected or identified. The mechanism that makes this possible, that allows a man to coach his daughter's school events in the morning and arrange a murder in the afternoon, is what psychologists call compartmentalization. It is not a passive condition. It is an active, practiced skill. The ability to maintain airtight separation between behavioral and emotional worlds, to inhabit completely different identities without the seams showing, is not something most people can sustain. In Heuermann, it appears to have been near total. His childhood provided the raw material, a domineering father who died when Rex was 12, a controlling mother, a social existence characterized by peripheral presence rather than genuine connection. No documented evidence of serious juvenile crime or institutionalization, but critically, no documented evidence of healthy emotional development either. Former classmates remembered him as strange, brusque, someone you didn't really know even if you saw him every day. This is consistent with the profile of a person who learned very early to present a functional surface while keeping the interior entirely private. The fantasies came first. They always do. Behavioral criminology is consistent on this point. Organized serial offenders do not begin with a sudden impulse. They build toward their first act over years, sometimes over decades. The fantasy is rehearsed, refined, elaborated. The first killing, when it finally occurs, is rarely the first time the person has mentally committed it. It is, in a deeply disturbing sense, familiar. What was found on Heuermann's digital devices after his arrest suggests a fantasy life of significant duration and dark specificity. Thousands of searches related to child pornography, torture pornography, active research into the Gilgo Beach investigation itself, not as a curious citizen following the news, but as someone tracking the specific movements of the people trying to find him. He Googled his own crimes. He monitored the investigation. He studied what investigators knew and adjusted accordingly. This is not a man who committed crimes in moments of uncontrolled rage and lived in denial the rest of the time. This is a man who was cognitively present for all of it, who tracked it, who maintained it, who found, in the ongoing act of not being caught, its own form of sustained engagement. The selection of victims was not random. Heuermann targeted women who advertised escort services through online platforms, a population that, in the 2000s and early 2010s, had limited institutional protection, limited likelihood of rapid police response to disappearance, and limited social infrastructure that would immediately force investigation. This is the calculus of a predator who had studied risk. He was not selecting these women because of who they were as individuals. He was selecting them because the structure of their vulnerability minimized his exposure. Strangulation was his method across all 8 victims. It is intimate in a way that firearms are not. It requires physical presence, sustained proximity, and the active suppression of another person's resistance. FBI profilers note that strangulation in serial cases often reflects a need for direct control, for total physical dominance over the victim in the moment of death. It is a method chosen by people for whom the act itself, not merely the outcome, carries psychological weight. He confessed to it 8 times in open court, in answer to the judge's repeated question: strangulation, strangulation, strangulation. Each time someone in the gallery gasped or wept or looked away, he did not adjust his expression once. In 2022, something changed. Rodney Harrison became the new Suffolk County Police Commissioner. He did not inherit the Gilgo Beach case as a closed chapter or a cold case in administrative suspension. He inherited it as an open wound, a case that had produced no arrests in more than a decade, that had accumulated criticism and frustration and the very visible grief of families who had spent years fighting for attention. Harrison made a decision that would prove decisive. He formed a new, dedicated task force specifically assigned to the Gilgo Beach murders, staffed with experienced investigators and given a clear mandate. The task force began at the beginning. They pulled every piece of evidence collected over the previous 12 years. They re-examined the physical forensics, the digital records, the witness accounts. They applied new analytical tools to old data. And approximately 2 months into this review, they found it. A witness had reported years earlier seeing Amber Costello, the last of the 4 core victims to disappear in September 2010, get into a dark green first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche. The vehicle description had been logged and filed. Now, investigators ran it through registration databases with renewed focus. The Chevrolet Avalanche was registered to Rex Heuermann. That was the first thread. What followed was methodical, the kind of patient, layered investigative work that does not produce dramatic moments, but produces, over months, an airtight case. Investigators began surveilling Heuermann without his knowledge. They pulled cell phone records and began mapping the movement of his personal phone against the known locations and times of the crimes. The data was precise. His phone had been in the same areas at the same times as the burner phones used to arrange meetings with multiple victims. The burner phones pinged to towers near his Manhattan office. They pinged to towers near his Massapequa Park home. The geographic footprint matched with a consistency that could not be explained by coincidence. They discovered that he had purchased at least 1 burner phone, a device supposedly untraceable, using his personal credit card. That single error of operational security, in a pattern otherwise characterized by meticulous compartmentalization, was the kind of mistake that investigators describe as inevitable. No one, across years of criminal activity, maintains perfect discipline. The longer the timeline, the more chances for a single slip. His internet search history, accessed through warrants, was damning in its scope. He had Googled the Gilgo Beach investigation repeatedly. He had searched for news articles about the case. He had looked up information about specific investigative techniques, what forensic methods police were using, what evidence they were pursuing. He had also, in a detail that speaks to the particular psychology of this type of offender, used one of his anonymous email accounts, the same accounts he used to contact sex workers, while logged into his personal phone. The accounts were supposed to be entirely separate. He had connected them himself in a moment of carelessness that handed investigators a direct link. The task force worked in silence. DA Ray Tierney later described the strategy deliberately. They wanted to arrest Heuermann and simultaneously execute warrants at his home, his office, and every device associated with him, all at once, before he could react. If he suspected he was being watched, he would destroy evidence. He had the intelligence and the organizational capacity to do exactly that. So they waited, they built, they watched him eat pizza on a Manhattan sidewalk. In the spring of 2023, FBI agents conducting surveillance observed Rex Heuermann leave his Fifth Avenue office during a lunch break and dispose of a pizza box in a sidewalk garbage can. The box contained partially eaten pizza crusts. The agents retrieved it immediately and sent it to the crime lab. The DNA extracted from the crust matched male hair found wrapped in the burlap used to bind Megan Waterman's body. The match was the confirmation they had been building toward. Every other piece of evidence, the truck, the cell data, the burner phones, the search history, had pointed at Heuermann. The DNA closed the door. On July 13, 2023, investigators arrested Rex Heuermann outside his Manhattan office and charged him with the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello. He was also named as the prime suspect in the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, the fourth of the Gilgo Four. He was 60 years old. He had been killing for 30 years. At the news conference that followed, Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison stood before the cameras and described Heuermann in language that broke from the measured vocabulary of law enforcement press releases. Rex Heuermann is a demon that walks amongst us, a predator that ruined families. 1 hour after the arrest, investigators arrived at the Massapequa Park house. Asa Ellerup was home. She was informed that her husband had been arrested and charged with multiple murders. Within days, she filed for divorce. The 12-day search of the Massapequa Park property that followed produced what prosecutors described as a massive trove of digital evidence, devices, drives, and documents that would take investigators months to fully process. Among the items recovered, the torture pornography prosecutors referenced in court filings, the so-called blueprint that prosecutors alleged Heuermann had used to plan his kills, and thousands of digital searches that painted in detail the interior life of a man who'd been living in plain sight for 3 decades. In the months following his arrest, Heuermann maintained his innocence. His defense attorney, Michael Brown, argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that a truck registration and cell tower pings and a pizza crust did not constitute proof of murder. He challenged the DNA evidence specifically, citing questions about the licensing of the laboratory that performed the cutting-edge whole genome testing. The defense argued that since the lab was not licensed in New York, the evidence should be inadmissible. In September 2025, the judge ruled against the defense. The DNA evidence would be admitted, a ruling described at the time as monumental. It was the first time such whole genome testing had been admitted as evidence in a New York case. With that ruling, the legal landscape shifted irreversibly. In January 2024, Heuermann had been charged in the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. In June 2024, new charges were filed in connection with the 1993 death of Sandra Costilla and the 2003 death of Jessica Taylor. In December 2024, he was charged with the 2000 murder of Valerie Mack. Each new charge arrived with new forensic detail: DNA matches, cell site analysis, additional digital evidence, layered onto a case that had become, by late 2024, one of the most extensively documented serial murder prosecutions in recent American history. A trial had been scheduled for September 2026. It never happened. Before the verdict, before the courtroom, before the word strangulation was repeated 8 times in front of a gallery full of grieving families, there were 8 women. Their names were not headlines when they were alive. They became headlines only after they were dead, and even then, only after years of institutional neglect had made their absence feel almost routine. They deserve more than a list. They deserve to be understood as people who existed fully before Rex Heuermann decided they were expendable. Sandra Costilla was 28 years old in 1993. She was the first. Her remains were found by hunters in North Sea, Long Island, far from Gilgo Beach, far from the cluster of victims who would later define the case. For decades, her death was investigated as an isolated homicide. No connection was drawn, no suspect was named. She existed in the public record of this case as a footnote until April 2026, when Heuermann stood in court and admitted he had killed her. What her life looked like, what her days contained, what she was building before it was taken, these details are not extensively documented in the public record. What is documented is that she was 28 years old, and that she was the first person Rex Heuermann killed, and that for 33 years no one knew. Valerie Mack was in her 20s in 2000. She was a mother. Her remains were found in 2 separate locations, some near Gilgo Beach, others in Manorville, indicating that Heuermann had dismembered her body after her death. She was not publicly linked to the Gilgo Beach case for years. Her identity was established through forensic analysis, but her connection to a suspect remained unproven until the task force's renewed investigation. In December 2024, she became one of the charges added to Heuermann's indictment. In April 2026, he admitted he killed her. Her son, Benjamin Torres, later filed a lawsuit against Heuermann's ex-wife and daughter, an indication of the specific, corrosive way that this kind of case extends its damage outward into the lives of people who had nothing to do with the crimes and no power to prevent them. Jessica Taylor was 20 years old in 2003. She had been working as an escort in New York City. Some of her remains were found in Manorville in 2003. Others were recovered at Gilgo Beach in 2011 during the broader search. Like Mack, her death involved dismemberment. She was 20 years old. Her case remained unsolved for more than 2 decades. Heuermann was charged with her murder in June 2024 and admitted to it in April 2026. Maureen Brainerd Barnes was 25 years old when she disappeared in July 2007. She left behind a young daughter. Her sister, Melissa Cann, spent the years after her disappearance as one of the most visible and persistent advocates for the Gilgo Beach victims, appearing at press conferences, speaking to journalists, demanding that law enforcement treat the case with the seriousness it deserved. 19 years, she said outside the courthouse on April 8, 2026. I lived in this space between heartbreak and hope. Maureen Brainerd Barnes was the reason her sister spent 19 years in that space. The hair found on or near her body contained DNA that investigators linked to Heuermann through his wife's genetic profile, a finding that added a particular dimension of violation to the case, the sense that Heuermann had carried physical traces of his crimes back into the family home where his wife and children lived. Melissa Barthelemy was 24 years old when she disappeared in July 2009. She had been advertising through Craigslist. What happened after her disappearance? The phone calls to her family, the controlled, taunting voice on the other end of the line, the specific cruelty of using her own phone to contact the people who loved her, distinguished her case in a way that would later prove investigatively significant. The calls required someone who was not afraid of proximity to the crime, someone who felt in those calls a form of power. The cell tower data from those calls would eventually place the caller near Heuermann's Manhattan office with a consistency that investigators found impossible to explain any other way. Melissa Barthelemy's family received those calls. They answered them. They tried to reason with whoever was on the other end. They had no way of knowing they were speaking to the man who had killed her. Megan Waterman was 22 years old when she disappeared in June 2010. She was a mother, and she had driven from Maine to Long Island to meet a client she had connected with through an online escort service. Male hair found wrapped in the burlap used to bind her body would become, years later, the specific piece of physical evidence that matched the DNA from Rex Heuermann's discarded pizza crust. Megan Waterman's body provided the forensic link that closed the case. She was 22 years old. Amber Lynn Costello was 27 years old when she disappeared in September 2010. She was the last of the Gilgo Four, the last woman Heuermann is confirmed to have killed before investigators began finding bodies in December of that year. A witness near the area where she was last seen reported seeing her get into a dark green first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche. That witness account, filed and stored for years, became the first physical thread investigators pulled in 2022 when the new task force began its work. Amber Costello's disappearance was the thread that unraveled 30 years of murders. Karen Vergata. Her name was not publicly linked to Rex Heuermann until April 8, 2026, the day he pleaded guilty. She had not been charged. She was not part of the formal indictment, but in the courtroom, as part of the plea agreement, Heuermann admitted that he had killed her too. 8. The final number was 8. Karen Vergata became part of the public record of this case in the same moment that the case officially ended. Her name spoken in a courtroom by the man who killed her as part of a statement of guilt that was the first and only public acknowledgement she would ever receive in this context. 8 women, 3 decades. One man in a dark suit, hands shackled, answering questions in a flat voice while their families sat 20 feet away. The question that follows every case like this, that follows every man who managed to kill repeatedly across years without detection, is the question of what the people closest to him knew or suspected or chose not to examine too closely. Asa Ellerup, Rex Heuermann's second wife, had been married to him since 1994. She raised 2 children with him in the Massapequa Park house. By all accounts, she was not aware of the murders. Prosecutors and investigators made this explicit after his arrest. There was no evidence that Ellerup or the children knew what Heuermann was doing. The Suffolk County DA's office stated clearly that they did not believe the family had knowledge of his crimes. What the family knew is a different question, from what the family experienced. Investigators noted after Heuermann's arrest a specific pattern. Asa Ellerup had been out of town on the nights of every confirmed killing. This could be coincidence. It could also reflect the kind of planning that characterized everything else Heuermann did, selecting his moments with deliberate care, ensuring that the domestic witness to his life was absent during the hours that mattered. His wife traveled. He knew her schedule. The timing of the murders, mapped against her absence, fit too cleanly to be accidental. After the arrest, the Peacock documentary House of Secrets, which premiered in June 2025 and returned with additional episodes through 2026, gave Ellerup a platform that was simultaneously sympathetic and revealing. She had spent the years between 2023 and 2026 processing the collision between the man she had lived with for nearly 30 years and the crimes he had committed across that same period. In the documentary's most discussed moment, she described a jailhouse conversation in which Heuermann told her he had killed 7 of his victims in the basement of their Massapequa Park home while she was away. In the basement of the family home, the same house where their daughter grew up, the same house where Heuermann had lived since childhood, the same property that had deteriorated quietly over the years while the surrounding neighborhood maintained its suburban upkeep. The basement of that house, Heuermann told his ex-wife, was where it happened 7 times. His daughter Victoria was seen weeping in court on April 8, 2026. She had attended the hearing alongside her mother. Both were seated in the back row. Neither looked at Rex Heuermann during the proceedings. He did not look at them. His defense attorney, Michael Brown, offered a particular framing of the guilty plea to reporters outside the courthouse afterward. He said his client had decided to plead guilty in part to spare his family the ordeal of a full trial. He used the word cathartic to describe what Heuermann might have experienced in admitting what he had done. Brown said Heuermann would likely have something to say at the sentencing hearing on June 17th. Whether that statement, if it comes, will contain anything resembling genuine remorse, or whether it will be the performance of remorse by a man who has spent decades performing normalcy, is a question that behavioral analysts have already begun to examine publicly. The answer, most suggest, is that genuine remorse of the type that emerges from empathy with victims is unlikely in someone with Heuermann's psychological profile. What is more probable is a statement calibrated for its audience, for the families, for the judge, perhaps for the historical record. The kind of statement a man who has spent 30 years managing surfaces might construct with the same precision he brought to everything else. In the months and years between his 2023 arrest and his 2026 guilty plea, the case continued to expand. The 12-day search of the Massapequa Park property generated a volume of physical and digital evidence that investigators described as unlike anything they had processed before. Devices, hard drives, documents, images, the digital record of a man who had been leading a parallel life for decades, in full detail, preserved in the devices he apparently never considered destroying. This is one of the most psychologically consistent details of the entire case. Organized offenders who engage in fantasy-driven behavior often maintain records of that behavior, not because they are careless, but because the record is itself part of the psychological structure. The archive is the evidence that it happened. The documentation is the proof of a reality that must, for such a person, be continually confirmed. In June 2024, Prosecutors introduced additional evidence suggesting Heuermann had been familiar with remote parts of Suffolk County where victims' remains were dumped. Geographic knowledge that supported the theory of local planning and deliberate site selection. The same June 2024 filing included the charges related to Sandra Costilla and Jessica Taylor, extending the confirmed kill timeline back to 1993 and filling in the three-decade arc that investigators had been assembling. In December 2024, Valerie Mack's murder was formally charged, the seventh victim chronologically to be added to the indictment. By early 2026, Heuermann's defense team and prosecutors were deep in pre-trial preparation for the September 2026 trial date. The DNA evidence had survived its legal challenge. The cell site data was in. The digital record was in. The witness account of the Chevrolet avalanche was in. The burner phone evidence, including the detail that he had contacted sex workers more than 500 times in the 2 years before his arrest, was in. Michael Brown, Heuermann's attorney, later described the moment the calculation changed. There came a point in this defense where Rex said, "I want to plead guilty." Brown framed it publicly as a decision made partly for his family to spare them the public exposure of a full trial. Whether Heuermann's motivation was genuinely altruistic or whether it reflected a more pragmatic assessment of the evidence arrayed against him is a question that does not have a clean answer. What is clear is that by March 2026, negotiations between the defense and Suffolk County DA Ray Tierney were active, and by early April, the deal was structured. The terms: Heuermann would plead guilty to 7 counts of murder. He would also admit, on the record, to the killing of Karen Vergata, a woman he had not been formally charged with killing as part of a broader accounting. In exchange, he would receive a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. 3 consecutive life sentences, followed by 4 sentences of 25 years to life. He would face no additional prosecution related to the 8 victims. He would cooperate with the FBI going forward. The cooperation clause is notable. Investigators have not publicly closed the question of whether Heuermann may have killed additional victims beyond the 8 he admitted to. The cooperation agreement preserves the possibility of future disclosures, information about other cases, other locations, other victims who may still be unaccounted for in the long stretch of years between 1993 and 2010. On the night of April 7, 2026, family members of the victims were notified that the hearing the following morning would result in a guilty plea. Some had known it was coming, others learned it in those final hours. All of them showed up. April 8, 2026, Suffolk County Court, Riverhead, New York. The courtroom was full to capacity. 2 overflow rooms had been set up. Every seat in the main gallery was occupied by victims' family members, investigators, law enforcement officials, and journalists. The families had been fighting for this day, some of them for nearly 2 decades. They had advocated publicly and persistently for an investigation that at times had seemed to move in geological time. They had kept their daughters' and sisters' names in public consciousness through sheer force of grief and determination. They were there. Rex Heuermann entered in a dark suit, hands shackled behind his back. He was 62 years old. He stood at the defense table and did not look at the gallery. Judge Timothy Mazzei read through the charges. For each victim, he asked Heuermann to confirm the manner of death. "You killed each victim in the same manner, namely strangulation." "Yes," He said it 8 times. The gallery absorbed each answer differently, some in silence, some with quiet sobs, some gripping the hands of the people sitting next to them. Heuermann's ex-wife sat in the back row, leaning forward, gripping the chair in front of her. His daughter wept. The hearing lasted approximately 30 minutes. At its conclusion, Rex Heuermann was led back out of the courtroom. He did not look back. Outside, DA Ray Tierney addressed the assembled families and press in a gymnasium at the Suffolk County Police Academy, a space large enough to hold several hundred people, and it needed to be. He apologized to the families of the victims. He credited the investigators who had spent years on the case, and he offered a final assessment of the man at the center of it. He thought that by killing them, he could silence them forever and get away with murder, Tierney said. But he was wrong. Melissa Cann, the sister of Maureen Brainard Barnes, spoke directly to the cameras and to the room. Today is about the women's lives who were stolen. It's about their voices, their future, and their families, the love that still surrounds them. They are the reason why we are here. The sentencing is scheduled for June 17th, 2026, 3 days from now. It will be the last official act in a legal process that began with a body found in a field in 1993 and ends 33 years later in a courtroom on Long Island. The families will be there again, the investigators will be there, the cameras will be there. Rex Heuermann will stand before a judge one final time, and the judge will say the words that convert a guilty plea into a permanent legal reality: life in prison without the possibility of parole. 3 consecutive life sentences. 4 additional consecutive sentences of 25 years to life. He will never leave prison. That is certain. What is less certain, what the June 17th hearing may or may not resolve, is whether Heuermann will say anything. His attorney indicated after the April plea that his client would likely have something to say at sentencing. The families are prepared for it. Some have stated they want to look at him directly when he speaks. Some have said they don't care what he says. Some are attending because showing up is the final act of defiance available to them. The refusal to let the last public moment of this case belong only to the man who created it. What Heuermann says, if he speaks, will be analyzed extensively. But it is worth noting, before that moment arrives, what his behavior across 30 years of killing and 3 years of legal proceedings has already communicated. He did not confess when caught. He maintained his innocence for nearly 3 years after his arrest. He did not cooperate voluntarily. He did not come forward. He did not, at any point, initiate any form of accountability. What he did, when the evidence became insurmountable and a trial became a certainty he could not survive, was calculate. He weighed the exposure of a full trial, the forensic details, the digital record, the testimony, his family forced to sit through months of it, against a controlled exit. And he chose the controlled exit. That choice is consistent with everything else documented about him. It is the choice of a man who has spent his entire adult life managing surfaces, controlling information, and minimizing exposure. The guilty plea is not a moral act. It is a logistical one. The difference matters, not to the legal outcome, which is the same either way, but to the question of what actually lives inside Rex Heuermann, and whether any part of it is capable of genuine reckoning with what he did. Most forensic psychologists who have examined this case at a distance say no, not because remorse is impossible in all serial offenders, but because the specific profile Heuermann presents, the 3 decades of sustained, methodical, fantasy-driven predation, the meticulous compartmentalization, the ongoing research into his own crimes during the investigation, the taunting phone calls to Barthelemy's family, is not consistent with a person who harbors significant internal conflict about his actions. The behavior is too coherent, too sustained, too deliberate across too long a period. What he may say at sentencing, in other words, may sound like remorse. It may contain language about regret and harm and the family's suffering. It may be, in the way that everything about Rex Heuermann's public presentation has been, a performance of the appropriate response rather than the response itself. There is a question that haunts the architecture of this case, and it does not have a satisfying answer. How many more? 8 is the number Heuermann admitted to. 8 is the number that will appear on his legal record, in his sentence, in every future account of his life. But investigators and prosecutors have not closed the door on the possibility that 8 is not the final count. The cooperation clause in his plea agreement, his obligation to work with the FBI going forward, exists precisely because law enforcement does not believe 8 is necessarily the complete picture. There are still unidentified remains among the Gilgo Beach discoveries. The cluster of bodies found along Ocean Parkway in 2010 and 2011 included victims who have not been fully identified and whose connection to Heuermann has not been established. There is also the broader question of the years between confirmed kills, the gaps in the timeline that investigators have documented but not explained. Between 2003 and 2007, there is no confirmed Heuermann victim. Between 1993 and 2000, there is only one. These gaps could represent periods of dormancy. They could represent something else. The FBI's cooperation agreement with Heuermann is not ceremonial. It is functional. It keeps open the possibility of additional disclosures, additional locations, additional names that may emerge over the coming years as investigators continue to work the case from the inside. Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney, when asked about the possibility of additional victims, has been careful. He has not stated that 8 is the final number. He has not stated that it isn't. He has said, in the measured language of an active investigation, that the work continues. For the families of the 8 confirmed victims, 8 is already more than enough. For the families of unidentified remains, or for families who have spent years wondering what happened to daughters and sisters who disappeared and were never found, the uncertainty is its own form of ongoing harm. A wound that a guilty plea for 8 murders does not close. The Gilgo Beach case revealed something specific about the conditions under which this kind of predation becomes possible and persists. Heuermann targeted a population that has historically occupied the margins of institutional concern. Women who worked in sex industries, who advertised services through online platforms, who met clients privately, who operated in spaces where disappearance could be initially categorized as voluntary absence rather than crime, were, in the years of his killing, less likely to trigger immediate, sustained police response. This is not a historical footnote. It is a structural fact that shaped the investigation from the beginning, that allowed multiple women to disappear before anyone recognized a pattern, and that the families of the victims, named explicitly and repeatedly in the years when they felt their loved ones' cases were not being taken seriously. The investigation's decade of stagnation was not caused entirely by this dynamic. It was also caused by institutional dysfunction, the leadership changes, the jurisdictional tensions, the specific failures of the original Suffolk County investigation that became the subject of their own scrutiny. But the two factors are not unrelated. Institutions are more likely to sustain attention on cases when they perceive the victims as deserving of that attention. The Gilgo Beach victims were not perceived that way by enough of the right people for long enough. And a man who understood this dynamic, who had selected his victims in part because of it, benefited from it for 17 years. When Rodney Harrison formed the new task force in 2022, he understood what he was correcting. When D.A. Tierney stood before those families in April 2026 and apologized, he was acknowledging a debt that extends beyond the specific failings of individuals to the broader failure of a system to treat these women's lives as equally worth protecting and equally worth solving. Rex Heuermann will be sentenced on June 17, 2026. He will spend the rest of his life in a New York State prison. He is 62 years old. He will die there. The house in Massapequa Park, the house he grew up in, the house he bought back from his mother, the house where 7 of his victims were killed in the basement while his wife was away, was searched extensively after his arrest. It has sat largely empty since then, a deteriorating structure on a street of well-maintained homes, carrying the specific weight of what happened inside it. Asa Ellerup, who was married to him for nearly 30 years and who says she did not know, has announced she will not attend the June 17th sentencing. Her attorney stated that she believes the day should be centered on the victims and their families. Her daughter Victoria, who wept in the April courtroom, has not made her plans public. The FBI continues to work the case. The cooperation clause is active. The investigation, in some form, is not over. The 8 women Heuermann admitted to killing were Sandra Costilla, Valerie Mack, Jessica Taylor, Maureen Brainard Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Lynn Costello, and Karen Vergata. They ranged in age from 20 to 28. They were daughters, sisters, and mothers. They were killed across 17 years by a man who went to work the next morning and the morning after that for 3 more decades. Their names were not famous when they were alive. They became famous only in death, and even then, only after years of being treated as less than fully worth the effort of finding justice for. The families who kept showing up, who kept saying their names, who kept demanding attention, who sat in courtrooms and press conferences and overflow rooms and kept insisting that these women mattered, are the reason this case was ever closed. Not the pizza crust, not the cell tower data, not the truck registration, the families. They refused to let the story end with bodies in the brush and an open file. There is a concept in forensic psychology called the mask of sanity, a phrase coined by the psychiatrist Hervey Cleckley in 1941 to describe the surface presentation of individuals who lack the emotional architecture that most people assume everyone possesses. The mask is not a deliberate disguise in the way that word implies. It is more fundamental than that. It is the learned presentation of a person who has observed how humans are supposed to behave and replicated it with sufficient accuracy to pass, indefinitely in some cases, as one of them. Rex Heuermann wore his mask for 62 years. He wore it to work and to school events and to client meetings and to his daughter's childhood and to 30 years of murder. He wore it into a courtroom, and he wore it through 3 years of maintained innocence. He may wear it at his sentencing in whatever words he chooses. What the mask concealed, what actually generated the behavior underneath it, is a question that no courtroom proceeding fully answers. The why of Rex Heuermann is not contained in a guilty plea. It is not resolved by a sentence. It lives in the intersection of a childhood, in a controlled house on Long Island. A father who died too early and left too much behind. A fantasy life that calcified into something irreversible. And a set of choices made across 3 decades by a man who was fully aware of what he was doing and did it anyway. That is the most disturbing thing about this case. Not the body count, though 8 is devastating. Not the duration, though 17 years is almost incomprehensible. The most disturbing thing is how ordinary all of it looked from the outside. The commute, the firm, the house, the family, the lunch break, the pizza. The most dangerous killers are not the ones who look dangerous. They are the ones who have learned with great care and long practice to look exactly like everyone else. Rex Heuermann looked like everyone else for 60 years. He never stopped killing.